All right, so I'm going to turn it over now to Dave Cameron from Gabrielino High School, who's going to talk about design-based learning.
Thank you, James. Excellent. It's always great to hear from elementary teachers because I learned so much that I get to use in high school. And just the tools and tricks transfer so well because a lot of times they forget all these ways that they can collaborate. Great strategies, Priscilla. All right, so my name's Dave Cameron, and like James said, at Gabrielino High School, we've been using Skies for since almost the beginning because we're really close to Caltech, and they kind of came down, and a few of our teachers said, "Oh, this looks great," and then in our science department, we've been using it ever since and seeing it grow and giving feedback to them to make it better and to make it kind of accessible for us. And it seemed like we had our own kind of private kind of a resource and tool that we could update with them by giving them feedback over the years. And it's really became this and grown into this really great positive tool. And as I've grown as a teacher, and kind of started to kind of look around for different methodologies to grow and to bring the students, our district paid for a lot of us to be trained in design-based learning. Before I get started though, uh, just so you can kind of see and hopefully um, jot down kind of my contact information. My email address, it's a Google email address. This makes it really easy to share with my with anybody, any materials that you see in this. You can also join the course if you'd like to, that I have up here. And you can also follow me on Instagram with DBL Focus here. And so how many of you have had a district initiative like a portrait of a graduate or something shown up in your district that kind of shows kind of some ideas about what students should be or how they should be after they leave their school district? And San Gabriel Unified has one, and it's called the Portrait of a Graduate. And so let me bring this up here. Whoops, sorry. So we have six things in our Portrait of a Graduate in San Gabriel. And so it's being a creative thinker. Here we go. So we have collaborator, global citizen, empathetic, communicator, resilient, creative thinker. And our district pushed this out, and many districts already have these initiatives that they want teachers to focus on with their students. And so I realized that design-based learning fits in this. And people always ask, well, what is design-based learning? And at UCLA, taking over this project that grew out of Cal Poly Pomona and out of kind of LA city schools in the 60s, it was this methodology kind of created by Doreen Gary Nelson. And what we do is we ask students to build a solution right away in about 20 to 30 minutes to a problem, generally a problem that they would know the solution to. We get this three-dimensional object that we can then deliver, learn required lessons, refer back to, and then revise once their thinking has changed. And so this process, in conjunction with Skies, provides this great way of accessing what students are thinking, presenting that material, communicating their thinking, and then communicating how their thinking has changed. And so this process and this 6.5 steps looks like this. And so we start with step one, what you need to teach, big topics, concept standards. We identify a problem. Then we ask students create a never before seen kind of object or solution to the problem. When we say never before seen, I don't ever say, build me a house, because then I get 30 houses that look the same. I ask students to build me a shelter or build me a form of protection. And then they build it. I set up a criteria list with wants and needs that guides their building and focuses, kind of like Griselda was talking about, like I needed work for them to do that's focused. Well, this is creating something that's focused that they know the solution to, that I'm going to tie in to their lessons. Once they build it, the collaboration starts. They start talking. They're talking while they're building, but then they present to each other in small groups, talking about what they build, their thinking. They present to the whole class, then they start writing about it. And then I start teaching guided lessons that can refer back. And this process can look daunting, but once again, it's very simple, going back to what is design-based learning. Now, how this differs from project-based learning is the fact that project-based learning, you're kind of gathering and then you build this sort of artifact at the end. What we like to do is start with the build, start with three-dimensional space, and then learn and then apply that back to their three-dimensional space. Our life is in 3 dimensions, and that's what we want our students to be studying. And so it can be a lot, but Skies help me look at the process every step of the way and provides a place to kind of guide and focus, and for me as a teacher to keep track. And so as we go along, one of the first kind of things we do, and if you're a teacher wondering, oh, what am I going to do the first couple days? One of the things that we always ask students to do is build an avatar. So how do they introduce themselves to be remembered? And so we have our criteria list here, which is our don't wants and our needs, and this guides their 3-dimensional building process. And you can see that Skies helps us push out the criteria list. And you can see that some of my needs are must fit in the size of your hand, have some form of sense to take in the world, be 3-dimensional. Sometimes I give them specific colored paper or something like that to set up some other lessons in the future. And so Skies has been a great tool to handle all of these responses. I get students taking pictures, actively putting them into the lesson, so that way they're all in one place. And so I can show you a little guide here. Let's see. And so if we have a sequence, you can see some of these student examples down here where they're building things out of recyclable materials, so it's very accessible and low cost. And now I have places with my students kind of work where they put it there. We can attach videos or their own narration as we go along, and this creates a chronological history of what they've done that we can always pull back on. Now, I can elaborate, I can add more cards in as we go along. Now, people go, well, you teach science. How does this relate to science if they just build this avatar? Well, we can start with on the surface. Okay, what materials did you use? What do they symbolize in your model? But more importantly, for my class, for high school students, is, okay, they built this, we talk about it, we have these great stories behind it. Then I get to fundamental skills. And so they measure, all right? So they start measuring their avatars. We get areas, perimeters, volume. We put those objects on balances, we get mass, and now we have mass over volume. We have a ratio, right, of how much mass is in a certain amount of space. And so all of these kind of fundamental skills can tie back into what they initially build. So we start with an avatar to represent them. And a lot of times this helps kind of get students to, one, start building, but also to listen to each other. They interview each other's avatars. And what I always hope for is that students have a freedom of talking about what they just built and they created because they own it. Compared to, well, tell me about yourself and what you did this summer. That puts them on the spot and opens them up for judgment, which I know many high school students really have a hard time with. But if you start by going, okay, you have this avatar that has some representation of you, tell us about what you built, how you built it, and your thinking behind it. That's the introduction. And Skies really helps to allow a place for students to put it down. And if these fall apart, break, or we just don't have space in the classroom to keep these for the entire year, I at least have record of what they said, what they were thinking, and how they tied it into the fundamentals like density that I'm going to teach in that first unit. Now, all of this ties into the portrait of a graduate here. And if you want to join my course with the code, feel free. You can use all of these materials. I have a more in-depth view of how design-based learning supports these 6 kind of proficiencies that our school districts really pushing out starting August 19th in my district. We'll have this great meeting and they're going to be talking about how we're going to show kind of evidence for all of our students meeting the portrait of a graduate throughout the year in all grade levels, from kindergarten through seniors graduating high school. And so as we kind of go along and how we use Skies in at a high school level, a lot of times, one, it's record keeping. Yes, I get a chronological kind of growth of a student and how they've kind of solved these design challenges, how they've tied it to fundamental curriculum, standards-based curriculum, and how it's changed. How did they revise it over a period of time to show their learning? And I have these 3-dimensional objects, which is great because it adds kind of a new connection for students in the material. One thing I learned from the pandemic was students' approach to science really has been in a box, in a computer box. We have great simulations through PhET and all these different places, but it's all done on a screen. Yes, I get it. It's not messy. It doesn't require a lot of setup for the teachers, but our world is in 3 dimensions. And this is what drew me in to design-based learning. And so I was sitting in this training, a 15-year teacher, and I saw all the teachers presenting these objects in the first introduction, and I went, oh, this is what I need. I need something students own to talk about, to work on those skills of communication and to look at the comprehension of the audience, because that's going to be really important. I think knowledge now can be found and used and applied. And is it good knowledge, or does it need to be kind of looked at in different ways? All right. So the biggest kind of thing that we do in design-based learning is we build a city, and this brings all students together into one place, and it's an active city we keep for the whole year. And one of the cities I did on a big scale with a group of teachers for professional development was this city here. Let's see. And so one of the questions I always like to ask students is, if this was your city, how would you change it? And looking down on the map, can anybody tell me what this city is? Does anyone know? Where this is? There's these new games out on iPhones that are like kind of geo guess, and they kind of give you a Google Street View and you have to guess it.
Is that the LA City Hall, like downtown?
No, this is not Los Angeles. This is not in California.
Okay.
I know, I'm like, who has a river with bridges across it? What?
One of the very fast growing cities in the United States. We have New York. All right, this is Austin, Texas. All right, so see the river going through, you see these bridges going across. And so Austin, Texas, unique place. Teachers there. We used a city here. And so this is what a map looks like that we build on. And so it's foam, but you could use anything. I've seen teachers use fiberglass floor panels and things like that. Usually I project it up and draw or tape kind of the streets. So we have some sort of guide, and then give them the problem. Humans need a place to share ideas, resources, and solutions to thrive. And if you ask anybody, and even kindergartners, when I ask them, how can we change the city around your school? They'll give me an answer. And that's one of the great parts about design-based learning, is that students know the answers to our problems, or they think they do. And that's a great thing, because I want to hear them. And it's very exciting. And so we get a criteria list generated, and then we get students building. And so this is students putting together the map of Texas, and then they build on the map, and then we analyze their builds, but kind of take some measurements. And this allows for immediate data sets. So one of the fundamentals in NGSS is using data. So a lot of times the data skill sets that we use in spreadsheets and things like that, we get from their buildings or builds. We load it into a spreadsheet. I ask them to find averages or whatever statistics we will use in a standards-based lab. So they practice that skill, and it transfers into now their laboratory practice. One of the things I've noticed in standardized testing and assessments is that students might not be totally familiar with the situation that they're proposing in the question for the California State Science Test, but they do know the process or the idea of systems, and they hopefully can transfer that into their responses on these questions. And so we build, we talk, we present, and then as they're going along, I love the ease of use of skies. And I did this morning. I just said, oh, one of the unique things in Austin are these moonlight towers. Where are they? Are they on our city map? And so I can throw readings in, like you might see here, and students can then read about some maybe past history, architectural design, or maybe it's a Superfund site. They tested a bunch of rockets like they did in the San Gabriel Valley, and there's polluted places in the ground. You know, a lot of students don't know their own neighborhood geography. And one of the powerful things about building a city with students is it brings them together, and they get to learn about history of their own neighborhood. Even in science class, I talk about where their water comes from now. We read water reports and all these different things as they kind of progress and keep their designs not only representing themselves, but a community that they create in the classroom. And so it's a never before seen city based on the location that they're in. Now for SKIES and design-based learning in UCLA, one of the things that I'm really looking toward is quantifying our data. We've been a project that has worked with numerous schools all around the world, from Illinois, most recently last summer, school district in rural Illinois, to Japan, to Mexico, California. A lot of different schools all over have been using design-based learning and the process, but we haven't collected a lot of assessment data. SKIES has a great tool for giving feedback and collecting data. And we want to quantify how effective design-based learning is for K-12 teachers, and have they seen a change? We have a lot of antecedent stories in books, Cultivating Curiosity, that has just been put out 2 years ago, about teachers and their use of design-based learning, but we want to see what it means to school, district, and teacher and student data. Does it improve test scores? I know for me, common finals between my department, pre-pandemic, my students were scoring about 5 points above other classes, but have to say that since I wrote the final, it might be a little biased that my students might do a little bit better than the other teachers. So I'm really trying to expand out and bring new teachers into the project, gather data, and hopefully push out some analysis. We're also looking for coaches at UCLA, especially subject and grade level specific. Middle school, we're in desperate need of teachers that want to try out this methodology and would love to collect a little data. We can bring you in, share resources. If you get a group of teachers at your school site, we can get you on Skies. I can give you materials to get started, give you some guidance. I can give specialist teachers time with you to work you through the process and give you some pointers of how this all works. We will have some more meetings for UCLA, Center X, and the Design-Based Learning Project as we go along. I've not only used this in science, I've used this teaching world history, which I did for 13 years, and this provided a great collaboration space for that. And getting students to act out a government, not only in science class, but also in history class, where you have policy being thought up. If they have a model city, has been a great tool for changing perspectives of students on what goes on at a community level. But I've also used it with coding and using AI and student data. And so one of the things that we did was, and this is great because I can actually link coding lessons in my computer programming class here and make it work. So we use student data to make an ice cream predictor. We did this with AI in about 6 minutes after sending out a questionnaire across our school just for fun. And you can kind of see what my students did, but I loved having it in Skies because it runs the code in my Python class, and we get an interesting prediction. If you're a sophomore and you're a cat person and you believe college is worth it, you really like cookies and cream ice cream. I don't know if that's true, but I've seen all of these kind of new things come up, and I love how Skies provides a place to keep this orderly for students to kind of use, access, and for me as a teacher to drop content in as we go along. So if you're interested in the Design-Based Learning Project or want any of these materials, feel free to join this course here. And check out the materials. Feel free to email me if you want more information, if you want to come to an informational meeting, and if your school site wants to work with UCLA Center X in kind of bringing design-based learning to your school, I'd love to kind of work with the school district on that. All right. Do we have any questions? And I think one of the best things that I've been using that saved me a lot of time is once I graded students' response cards and I go into the gradebook, I can send it to my Google Classroom or Schoology, and I've had to use both in different school sites, and then upload it from Google Classroom into whatever grade program. My school district uses Aries. It works great. It even sends the assignment in so the students know, oh, I missed it, or I didn't see it. I go, it's in Google Classroom too, and then I batch it over to my gradebook using some import. So a couple clicks and I have my student responses uploaded to a gradebook also, and this has really saved me a lot of time because students now need that feedback. We've noticed that, attention span for high school students is about 17 seconds, I think was the study I read last summer. And if you keep that feedback coming, they stay more engaged. And also that idea of focus when students are doing independent work, I can put Skies on GoGuardian and just have the links that they might have to click through to get to that place. set up and protected, so I know that they're focused in class. And Go Guardians, our district's kind of big brother tool to overwatch everything. But I also, can get their responses in real time and give them feedback as we go along. All right. Any questions about design-based learning, UCLA Center X, and what we do?
While we're letting everyone find the unmute button, and feel free to interrupt, I just want to say thanks, Dave, and reassure everyone that we're going to share in our thank you follow-up Dave's information, and make sure you also have the link to his Skies course, because yeah, it's really exciting. And I just, as someone who helped to develop Skies, looking at the presentation, it's so cool to see Griselda sharing things from first grade and Dave sharing things from high school, because I can see how in the lesson that we'll share with you guys that Dave prepared, that it has all of the various elements that you might need. There's so much content organized in one place. And I was really happy that Dave mentioned both the assessment and also the grading, because I want, a lot of people here realize that that's, Skies is a big time saver on that. But if you don't, we want to help you reap those benefits on time saving with the whole grading process. We know how a pain that can be, and just make the formative assessment process easier and more fun.
Yeah, so what you're seeing here is a pre and post assessment that I can run my students through in one unit. And so one of the things that I'm hoping for teachers to, if they want to join us at UCLA Center X, is doing you can even do a smaller pre-assessment of maybe 5 questions that are standards-based that you're going to teach at the end of the unit. Follow the design-based learning process, give a post-assessment. We'd love to gather that data. I'd love to kind of use it through Skies. That way, we can analyze kind of how we can improve the methodology and really cater to kind of every teacher at every grade level, and know the problems and the successes that we can get from teachers using this methodology. And one of the things that we've just had a hard time doing is quantifying it. We can talk stories all day, but I think districts and teachers want to see numbers and improvement in their test scores, and just data that supports it. And so we're starting to really look at how we can do this effectively with teachers in other districts, with different groups of students, and really to get a look at how well the methodology works in our classrooms.
Thanks, Dave. This is a super cool opportunity, and so we're going to make sure to share this, because when I was giving a presentation over the summer at my undergrad, University of Florida, to some undergraduate physics majors, the professor that organized my presentation was talking to me afterwards about the experiences I brought to college. And I was just thinking about that, seeing Dave's presentation and Griselda's presentation, because Dave mentioned, we live in a 3-dimensional world, and these programs online can be great because they keep things neat and whatever, but there's so much gosh, as someone who spent time professionally being trained as an academic, focusing on experiments, science experiments, I can't, it's hard for me to find the words to emphasize how important it is for students to get those experiences where they're building things. Because when you're in a lab and you're working with someone and you're like, wow, this person has never even made a cardboard shelter before. It's amazing how your ideas, how much you grow when you sort of have an idea and then you try to put it into the 3-dimensional world and you realize, oh wow, yeah, it didn't work out exactly how I thought. Yeah, I love how we got to see all the different elements in Dave's presentation. You might have noticed like there's different Google elements and these different things that are linked, and then the documentation we've heard a couple times, just the ability to document things. And